Well, hello and welcome to Transform Tuesday. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm joined today by Sarah Mitchell, head of our documentation department. So today on Transform Tuesday, I am going to take you on a little tour here of an invoicing example that we've been working on over the last couple of Transform Tuesdays. And in the past, we had been working on let me just go ahead and skip down to that slide. We've been working on something that looked kind of like not that. Kind of like this, the invoice generation form. If you recall, it was just a way for a person who's got TransForm installed on their phone to create invoices using it. And the part that we had handled up until now had been just the, well, two parts actually. One was the building of the form and hooking up the TPL necessary to do the calculations and things like that. We'll go over that a little bit today. But the second half of it is the ability to actually then take that information once it's been filled in and use it to generate a well-formatted invoice, like the one I see here. If you take a look at the invoice that's up here on my screen, see, I actually had quite a lot of control when I was setting it up. I got to decide who it was from, what email it was coming from, who it's going to. Then I used some templating and some HTML to sort of line it out like this. And here is the whole thing. Oh, it looks like I cut off the total and subtotal, but don't worry, I will show that to you in a moment as well. So we're going to just get started real quickly with a quick overview of what the form looks like, but then we're going to really spend most of our time talking about how we generate reports like this and get them to send. So let's start with the designer, and we're going to go into Transform Central, and I'm going to go and open up my invoice generation form that we're working on here. And I've been through this one in like I said, in other sessions. So what we've done is it generates an invoice number for you automatically. It does this system that we used, and there are other ways of doing it, actually just uses this by converting the date timestamp, I think, to milliseconds or something like that. So you'll really never have two that'll be the same, but they won't be sequential either. Maybe what you're looking for, may not be what you're looking for. Maybe in another session, we'll talk about how you could do sequential invoice numbers if you prefer. After that, we go on to collecting the name, address, city, state, zip. If you recall, we showed how to break these up onto separate lines by doing a little bit of formatting, layout formatting, by putting them into a section and then setting each one of the fields to its appropriate size within that section. We've covered that in another one, a responsive layout session. We collect the phone, we collect email address, and then we also, of course, collect the line items that are in the invoice. And so we've created a fictional business called Acme Technologies or Acme Inc. or something like that. And what they theoretically do is install IT equipment and things like that, or smart speakers and home theater. So if you take a look at the items that you can choose from in your list, there are things like firewall configuration, outdoor cable runs, and so on. So that's sort of the background behind this use case here. So the idea is that someone either on-site uses Transform to fill in all this information. In fact, let me just pop over to my phone, see if we can do this. I'll give you an example. So I'm going to turn on screen sharing. And let's see if that's going to work or not. It is going to work. Terrific. All right, let's go to Transform. And here we are in Transform. And I'm going to add a blank form, and I'm going to choose that invoice generation form. Okay. So you'll see it's filled out now a new unique number for me up here. I'm going to go and enter this in as if I'm really doing an invoice. Let's say we're going to have it go to someone named Frank Jennings. He is our customer, and he lives at 123 Main Street. I know, very original. And that will be, let's put him in Boston. Boston, Massachusetts. Oops, I think I'd like to capitalize the A. I'm being very picky here for sample data, aren't I? All right, let me get 2134, and we'll give him a phone number. All right. And oh, we'll give him an email address too. frank@example.com. Now that email address can be used later on by the system to automatically send a copy of the invoice to Frank after this has been filled out. I'm going to go ahead and now add some lines. Let's say we ran some cable inside. So I'm going to say we ran, I don't know, 150 feet of cable. And we charge $1 a foot for running cable. And there's no tax. But then we decided we're going to put in let's do a new Wi-Fi hotspot. And just one of those. And I'll make it like a mid-priced one, make it $150. And is tax applicable? I'm going to say yes, it is on this item. And let's just add one more. Say we set up a smart TV for them. One television, and let's say the going price is $50. Now, in other sessions, I showed how you could actually use a lookup from an onboard SQL database. So you might have an awful lot of products or services that you'd like to choose from, and those could be stored right here on that device. The other thing that you could do is have it so that when I chose, for example, my smart TV setup, it automatically could fill in what the price should be. It might not know the quantity. That's up to me to fill that out. And it could also know whether or not it was taxable or not. In this case, I'm going to say it's not taxable. So down here at the bottom, we'll see that our subtotal is now $350 with $9.38 in taxes, creating a grand total of $359.38. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click Save and Send. And we'll go ahead and do that. So as this is uploading to the server, great. A report, I'm going to go ahead and close down this screen sharing because we don't need this anymore, screen mirroring. And let me just pause my screen for a second while I open up my email. Okay. I'll close that email window and I will continue to share my screen. So this is what we just created, and this is what I just got in my mailbox. 1:07 p.m., that's right now. Frank Jennings, 123 Main Street. There's his indoor cable run, hotspot, smart setup, quantity, price, extension, total, and all that. And if we wanted to get really fancy, we could have also created a hyperlink at the bottom that could have linked, say, to PayPal or another payment type of service so that the customer or the client could just go ahead and click on it and pay you all in one go. So I think you can see that this could actually be pretty handy if you're doing invoices, but you're probably wondering, okay, I know how to set up a TransForm form, but how do I build that report in the background? And we're going to show you that right now. We're going to use Alpha Anywhere. And most people on this call are familiar with Alpha Anywhere. It's our low-code development platform for building web and mobile applications. The Alpha Anywhere Community Edition is free of charge. I know free is a great word. And you can use that to build out your reports for TransForm. So you don't actually have to buy Alpha Anywhere. You can just download it onto your PC. So when it's downloaded and installed, if you go into the Tools menu and you go to TransForm Utilities, you'll see buried down here on this menu is a builder for TransForm OnSubmit Events. Let's just open that right up. Okay, and what we have is this blank box. What I want to do is I actually want to fetch the definitions from TransForm Central. Well, what does that mean? Let me show you. I'm going to go to the Home section here, and you'll see here are my OnSubmit events for my TransForm account. An OnSubmit event is something that fires, so it could be sending a report, it could be sending an email. There are a bunch of other options as well, which we can go through in a second. But in this case, it's just a report. This is just the list view. This is the scary JSON view. But basically, this is actually what defines the whole report and lets TransForm know everything that they need to know to do that. So let me go back to list view. Everything it needs to know to send out that report. Okay, so that's that. So this is already here stored in my TransForm account. So before I get started, what I want to do is I want to grab that chunk of JSON code and I want to bring it into Alpha Anywhere. And I could do that simply by clicking the fetch definition from TransForm Central, where I get this dialog box prompting me for my API key. As a reminder, you can get your API keys right here back here on the Home tab of Alpha Transform, you can go to the Get API Developer Key. You can use the one which has got the most limited scope that you need. And I think in this case, read data would be fine. So I could click on that. I could click Get API Key. A box would open up, and then I could grab that API key and use it. But anyway, so I did that before, and I entered that in here. And so I'm just going to say fetch definition. And you'll see there's my report. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and I could test the action. Let's do that. And it's going to say what data, in other words, what form should I use? I think I'd like to use one that I just filled out, maybe this one here. The 12th at, there we go. And so we're going to click OK. And I'm going to say test. And now it shows me what the report should look like. So how did I define that report? Well, what I did was I clicked here, add action, and then I chose the report that I wanted right here, or the action that I wanted right here. Here are the other actions I was talking about before. You can send email. You can call a webhook, another API service, for example. You could send data directly into a SQL database. You can do SMS messaging. You could set values in the user fields. Those are top-level fields on the form. And you could also dispatch and reroute the form. So for example, you could have it set up so that if a inspection is rejected, then that form goes on to a supervisor or something like that. But today we're working with reports. I would just click on report and I'd click OK. I've already done that because I have one here. So what I'm going to do is show you what the properties are there. All right, so we're going to go into edit action. And the first thing we're going to use is we're going to grab the sample data. So here's the sample data that it's been grabbed. And again, I'm going to just grab a more current version of it. So I'm going to say select, and I'm going to grab this one. Okay. And you're going to need some sample data in there in order to be able to create your report. Otherwise, Alpha isn't going to know what fields are available to you to put into your template. Okay. So here's conditions. If you decided that you didn't always want to send this report, there might be a condition under which you don't send the report. Maybe, if you save it, but something is wrong with the report, or one of the fields is out of spec or something like that, you can actually set up a JavaScript expression that says only send it under these circumstances. Now you don't have to fill this one out, because if you don't, it'll always do it. That's kind of what the behavior we want this time. All right. So then the next thing we do is we have a whole bunch of things to fill out here. And this is a little time consuming. I have a feeling we're going to make this process a little easier. It's not rocket science, but let me show you what I mean. When I want to send that email, I can decide, I need to first tell Alpha where it's going. And instead of just specifying, you might think, oh, I could just type in an email address here. No, what you do instead is you write a little piece of JavaScript, and that JavaScript does nothing other than set this thing called result equal to the email that you wanted. Now you'll notice I have this hard-coded, so these invoices always go to me. But if I wanted to, I could put in a comma and hard-code another email address there. Or, and this is pretty cool, I could add a field which has got an email address in it. So for example, I could say the email to field. You see what I did there? So results now equals, maybe that's your name plus, and there's your client's name, and that's what you filled out actually literally in the thing. So let's test the code. Let's see what you would have gotten back. Test code. And we would have gotten back dave@alphasoftware.com, frank@example.com. That's exactly what we want. Those would be the two email addresses that we would send it to. I'm going to click cancel because I don't really have to save that change. Cancel. Actually, without saving changes. Yes, great. Then the send from. Like the send to, you need to set a variable called result, and I've hard-coded this, guides@alphasoftware.com. Of course, you could also programmatically set who it's from here as well. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you could. Here's the display name, which is different than the, well, that's the name that you'll see in your email reader. So if I go back to PowerPoint here and I show you this, automatic message system, that's the name of That's how it comes across when I get it in my mailbox. And so that's where you set it here in alpha. And again, you use it using the result equals notation. Subject, same deal, result equals this. And again, this could be dynamic. You know, your report for, and then you could put a date, or for example, something like that, and customize the subject line that way. Send format, that's an interesting one. I'm choosing HTML, and there are two types of reports that you can generate, two formats. You can do HTML or you could do PDF. And for a variety of reasons, I prefer to do HTML, so that's the one that we're going to use. One thing that I like about it is you don't need a PDF reader. It shows up right directly in line in the message, email, message management. There are reasons that, you know, HTML. That's what I did. Cancel. And then let some things about the size of the output, because if you keep in mind, PDF online is really it's page layout, sorry, a page-based display system. So here you would put in, we have 8.5 by 11 inches for the width and stuff. But again, if you're just doing HTML, you can ignore that one. Let's pop down a message body.
Hey, Dave.
Now, this just says, yeah.
Your audio and video lagged out a little bit there when you were explaining the send format. So if you could
send
quickly
format,
go back
sure.
And read, yeah, that'd be
great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So for the send format, again, you're setting a variable result equals and use HTML for the reasons that I mentioned before. It just shows up in the body. It's not a separate attachment. It's more convenient. Okay. Multiple templates. I'm not going to go over that. Spark Post key. This one is interesting. Right now, I actually have filled in a Spark Post key for a Spark Post account that we have. Shortly, it's not in there now, but I'd say in the next week or so, you're not going to need to have your own Spark Post account to do this. Instead, you'll be able to select or put in the word system so that in here, and what that will do is that'll use our key, so you don't actually need one. We decided that that would be a nice thing to add to the TransForm account, so we're adding that at no additional charge. Then the next thing is the template type, and there are two. One is custom, and let me show you how you set that. Obviously, it's a result equals thing again. So custom is one, and the other is TransForm form. TransForm form is kind of interesting. I haven't played around with it very much, but what it lets you do is it lets you use the format of your TransForm form that you designed to create, or form design that you designed, I guess it's the technical term, to actually create the output of the report. But I decided in this case, I really didn't want to do it that way. It would look kind of, I don't know, weird. So instead, I decided that we're going to do custom, so we'll create our own template. All right, hopefully everyone is with me so far. Now we're going to actually dive into the cool part, and that is the template itself. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And we get this template editor. Sometimes when I open it, I find that and maybe that's just my screen, I find that these buttons here at the bottom are hidden. Keep in mind, you have to be able to get to them. So you make sure you move the window up, because when you're done, you're going to want to click OK. You're not going to want to just click this red X, because any changes you make will be lost. All right, so when I created this for the first time, it gave me a really simple template. And that really simple template just had just listed out all the fields. I think there were field names next to it, I'm not sure. But what I did instead was I went in here and I started to write my own HTML. So I created a div, and I confined it to 650 pixels. A div is like, imagine like a box or an area on your screen. It can span multiple lines, and you can give it sizes. You can do a bunch of stuff with divs. The reason I go with 650 is because that makes it appropriate for just about every email reader out there. So you have to keep in mind, screen size in an email reader isn't exactly the same as screen size when you're doing regular HTML web work. So I find 600 is ultra safe, but nowadays you can get away with 650. So then all I did was just write some more HTML. You know, I put in the name of the company and invoice and all that. And then when I got to the point where I needed to actually display the data, that's where I started to insert my fields. And so, for example, I have one here called payee name. So that right here, that's this one here, Frank Jennings. So if I took that and I deleted it, bang, you'll see it, Frank Jennings is gone. So how do we put him back? Well, what I'll do is I could just say insert field, and I'm going to grab that payee name, click OK, bang, and I inserted it here into my template. And as you can see here in the preview window, it's there as well. So let's go through a couple of the tabs, then I'm going to jump back into a little bit more HTML, and we'll see it all working together again. So if you decided to, you could actually create, I don't know why you'd want to use JavaScript, especially if you're sending out an email, so that may not make any sense, but you might very well want to define your own classes and subclasses and in CSS. I used a combination. I used some of the, some classes and some inline styles. It's really whatever your preference is. I tend to use a lot of inline styles because they're just quick for me, but you know, it's not a great practice if you're doing a long web page, but for a simple email, I don't think it makes a big deal. Okay, so when all of that was in place, I would click OK, and I can now go ahead and preview, see what it looks like. And there is the example right there. And in fact, I can even take it a little further. If I clicked OK, I could say test and say test, and it report was sent via email. So it was sent to me via email, and that's the report that I got. All right, so let's jump a little bit more into the HTML, and then I've got a couple little things to go through, and then we will call it good. So let's close this down, edit that action. I'm gonna go into templates. So this is the part, this is another part that's a little confusing. So it was easy enough to insert a field here, like, you know, which is only going to appear once. But what about these? These are repeating sections. So we don't know how many they're going to be. Maybe there's 7 things on the invoice, maybe there's just 1. So how do we get it to iterate through the loop? Well, we do that using something called a directive. And I'm going to go down here. I'm going to show you how that works. So right here, this is just a comment, but it says, oh yeah, sorry, it's not just a comment. This is something which tells it that this is the beginning of the data group. And this is the end of the data group. So that's the beginning and the end. And what this tells Alpha to do is when you come across the array in this data group, you should go through and put in all this HTML, in other words, template it like this, and then go back through and loop through again, and loop through again, and loop through again until you have gotten all of the invoice items displayed. So you can do that. If you wanted to insert the, is it this? Yeah, that's called a, I think it's called a format directive. Nope, different type of directive. My bad. But anyway, this is when you create a report using TransForm and using Alpha Anywhere's OnSubmit Builder, it actually puts this code in for you automatically. So even if I can't find it immediately here, I know it there. There is template syntax help though if you need it. I'll open that up. Oh. A little slow today. It's fine. And that's that. So I don't think there's anything else really tricky to do here. If you want to go, this is for iterating through line items. You can insert fields. When it's all done, you can test it. Okay, so there were 2 things that I want to go back to on the form. And I wanted to show you what we did here. And I'm going to go done. I'm going to choose invoice generation. We're going to go into the code behind our form because we had a couple of questions on that. One was, how did we do the sales tax? And we did that using TPL. We set the sales tax amount ahead of time. So on load, we set TR0, tax rate 0 equals 6.25. And then for the calculations, we run a script, and I've covered this one in another thing, so I'm not going to go through it right now, but we run a script that basically goes through all of the items and figures out how much they all cost if you were to add them together, and it sets the total to it, and then it rounds that number so that it's doesn't have a million decimal places at the end. And then the last thing I wanted to show you, because I had a question on this one too, was how do I put in that submit button at the end? And the only tricky thing about it is that it's got kind of a name that you wouldn't expect. So let me find my button here. That's weird. Where did I put my button? Am I in the wrong invoice? No. Ah, here it is. Oh, this is exactly what I'm going to tell you. Okay, so this button here, the save and send button, when you add one of these from the form control types, it's important to remember that the name of this isn't button. There's one called action button. It's not submit or anything like that. It's called change status. So what you want to do is you choose the change status option. And then when you choose change status, you can decide what you're going to choose it to. Let's say it's submitted. You could decide whether or not it's going to stay on the phone after it's been uploaded, or should it be deleted from the phone. And you have a couple other options here as well. You could change the message that appears on the button. This right now says close and upload form, but you could say close and send or something like that. I don't know. And it's changed there. Let me just remove this because I don't want that. And then one last thing to remind you of quickly, whenever you do make a change, you need to update here first, right? And save it. And then in TransForm Central, then on the device, when you're adding that, let me turn screen mirroring back on. Yeah, all right, there we go, great. When you add a blank form, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click refresh from server so that it knows to get the updated form type. So any changes that you make will be reflected in that. All right, let's shut down mirroring. So let me go through and see if we're missing anything. Let you know that how to dynamically set the email address, how to create the template we've seen. I let you know that there's very soon going to be a system key that you can use for SparkPost, so you don't have to get your own account. Although SparkPost does have a free account, which lets you do like 100 emails per day or something like that, which might be more than sufficient if you want to use that. And talked a little bit about fetching and saving, the OnSubmit definitions and all that. So I think that's I think we've covered everything we want to cover. Let me jump down into questions and see what we've got here. Nothing here, just some audio and video lags. Hopefully those have been taken care of. Well, if you do have other questions, go ahead and send them to tfservice, that's TransForm Service, tfservice at alphasoftware.com. A team of people here monitor that email, and we are happy to get back to you with answers. So thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you for helping me out here today, Sarah, as always. We hope to see you at our next Transform Tuesday. Take care and stay well. Bye-bye.